Well, we're back, and what an honor for me to have back with us again a good friend, and I tell you, somebody that I have great respect for, one of the great commentators and television hosts of our day, Ben Kinchlow. You probably have seen him years past, co-hosting the 700 Club. He ministers all over the world, and his passion and his spirit is infectious, and I am honored to have him back with us today because he's authored a book that I think you're going to find to be pretty interesting. Black Yellowdogs. The most dangerous citizen is not armed but uninformed. So we're going to talk to him about that, and there's a picture of the book on the screen. You may want to check it out at the bookstores. Ben, nice to have you, my friend. How you doing?
Hey, Perry, it's a pleasure to have you back, and I hope you can still say nice things after this interview.
Likewise. Well, listen, this is a fascinating book, and you have really touched a nerve here. First of all, tell our audience and describe for us Yellow Dog.
Well, first of all, let me make sure that people understand that this is not an insult to African Americans. I'm not calling African Americans dogs.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, back in 1928, when Herbert Hoover was running for president against Al Smith, the hardline Southern Democrats, despite the fact that Al Smith was a Yankee Catholic, said, we're going to support him anyway. When the senior citizen or the senior senator said, well, I'm going to support Hoover, they said, how can you? Well, he said, how can you support a Yankee Catholic? And the response from the hardline Democrats was, I'd vote for a yellow dog if he ran on the Democrat ticket. Well, the press picked that up, and consequently, it has come to mean that any person who votes Democrat, regardless of issue, regardless of candidate, is referred to as a yellow dog Democrat. And since African Americans, since the 40s, have been voting for anywhere from 96% up to 100% for Democrats, they have earned the title Black Yellow Dogs.
All right. Now, with that comes the big question, Ben, and I know you wrestle with this, and a lot of us do. Why do blacks blindly support Democrats and vote Democrat?
Because, as I said in the outline of the book, the most dangerous citizen is not armed but uninformed. You see, the problem is African Americans since the 1940s have believed, because of the media, that it is the Democrats who are responsible for the advances in civil rights in the United States. And that's just not true. You see, from Abraham Lincoln all the way down to FDR, blacks voted Republican for two reasons. First of all, they understood that the Republican Party was the party of Lincoln. And second, the Democrats would not allow blacks to vote. No, blacks vote Democrats because they think that from FDR is where they start to trace civil rights gains for blacks. You see, and all the way up to and including LBJ and the 64-65 Voting Rights Act, they think that Democrats are responsible for that. That's why they vote Democrat.
All right. Are blacks becoming informed?
I hope that they are, but unfortunately, we have a media that, by its own admission, if you look at the Lichter-Rothman survey that was done not too long ago, the media, by its own admission, is leftist leaning, and they vote Democrat overwhelmingly. So the problem we have today, Perry, is that you have the media continuing to disinform the American public. And if you aren't looking for other avenues of information, you just suddenly, you just accept the fact that this is the way it is. So today, just as before, we are still being fed the line that who's responsible for our gains in America is the Democrats, and that just isn't the truth of the matter.
You know, it's been said, Ben, some of the best and most powerful preachers in America are in the black churches. And yet, when it comes to these topics and these issues, they don't touch it with a 10-foot pole. What do you think?
Unfortunately, that is far too true, that for decades, most African-American preachers have stayed out of politics. But if you would look and see who was at the lead of all the all of the civil rights leaders, it's been from Reverend Martin Luther King, and for some reason, preachers in the black community have been the leaders in our community. And unfortunately, most of them, with the exception of Martin Luther King, have been Democrats. And a lot of people don't realize that Martin Luther King was a Republican, but they say, well, you know, most of Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton and people like that are all Democrats and support the Democrat agenda.
What do you think of the Al Sharptons and the Jesse Jacksons? What are they doing to further enhance the uninformed black?
Well, let me read you something that was written a couple of hundred years ago. This is the direct quote. There's another class of colored people who make a business of keeping the troubles, the wrongs, and the hardships of the Negro race before the public. Having learned that they are able to make a living out of their troubles, they have grown into the settled habit of advertising their wrongs, partly because they want sympathy and partly because it pays. Some of these people do not want the Negro to lose his grievances because they do not want to lose their jobs. That was written by somebody named Booker T. Washington almost 200 years ago, and that describes, unfortunately, what has happened with some of our leaders like Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson. You see, if you already have your civil rights, you don't need a civil rights leader, and therefore they would be, you know, we don't need civil rights leaders anymore.
What do you think? How would you respond to the criticism from the black community to a Clarence Thomas and a Condoleezza Rice?
Well, I get those same kinds of criticism. You know,
I was going to put your name in there.
oh yeah, I get those same kind of criticisms. As a matter of fact, what I did at the introduction of Black Yellowdogs, I listed some of the things that we've been called: Oreos, coconuts, Uncle Tom, official government Uncle Toms, so on and so forth, non-practicing black zebras, and Reverend pork chops, and even Judases. Because what happens is when you find an African American that stands up for the Republican Party, whom the blacks think, because as I mentioned, the aforementioned leftist leaning media, they think that the Republicans are anti-black. And here's why. Have you ever heard, you hear the term conservative all the time, right? Mm-hmm. Well, for any African American who was born prior to the 60s revolution, the word conservative was for years, decades, tied to the Democrats who refused to allow blacks to vote. In fact, the conservatives were all Democrats, and they would not let African Americans vote. So today, when you hear the word conservative, it is applied to Republicans, and so many blacks are under the mistaken idea that it is the black or the conservatives who are, quote, the conservatives keeping us back from progress, and that just isn't the truth.
Wow. Let me take a quick break here, Ben. We'll be right back, and I am so honored to have back with us today Ben Kinchlow. His new book, Black Yellowdogs, The Most Dangerous Citizen is Not Armed but Uninformed. By the way, it's put out by WND Books. You could probably go to WorldNet Daily Books and order it there. Check it out at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and even at the Christian bookstores. We'll be right back with Ben right after this. Okay, we're back, and our guest today is Ben Kinchlow. Again, we are so honored that he'd give us some of his time. He's authored a new book, and let me tell you, this is a must-read. Black Yellowdogs, The Most Dangerous Citizen is Not Armed but Uninformed. It is put out by WND Books, so you can go to WorldNet Daily, check it out there, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and you may want to check it out at Evangel or Christian Discount Books. Ben, fascinating topic, to say the least. I think that most of us Christians in America, maybe I'm just ignorant, I don't think there's a racist bone in our body, and yet people think there is. But for the most part, when it deals with Obama, and he's running around calling himself a Christian, we're having a hard time taking his policies and lining it up with Christianity and accepting it. And because we reject it, then we are then noted as being racist. Help me with this.
Well, one of the things that happens is the media, particularly the media, learned a long time ago that the best way, and I wrote about this in my book a little bit, is you fight facts with fertilizer. We learned this back in the 60s when I was a radical extremist. But we found out that you don't try to offset the facts because you don't have the facts. But when you fight facts with fertilizer, if you can dump enough fertilizer onto the issue, then people will not worry about the facts. And this is the problem that has existed in America today, is the media has specialized in dumping fertilizer into the issue as opposed to facts. Consequently, when anyone disagrees with an issue that has to do with something that the left considers a right, then they immediately use racism and or discrimination against the people who oppose it. For example, if you oppose rights for, let's just say, homosexual marriage, let's just say you object to homosexual marriage, then they accuse you of being a homophobe, and so you can't say, well, I'm for right and wrong, I just don't agree with that. Then you are a homophobe. The same way as you disagree with something that Obama says, then they immediately accuse you of being a racist. And since I disagree with many of his policies, then I'm automatically assigned the title as an Uncle Tom on Oreo. So this is nothing new. This is, back from the 60s. Fight facts with fertilizer.
All right. That's an interesting way of putting it. Thank you for sharing that with me, because you're going to help me now in the future when I have to go public with that. Let me ask you this, Ben. The president came from a black liberation theology. I don't know if we get that and what that really means, but he is tagging himself as being a Christian. And I have to tell you, I'm trying to figure out a way to criticize this without being seen or heard or as being radical or racist, certainly. But look, there's something wrong here. There's something disconnected here, because there is nothing Christian about this administration whatsoever. And I realize that's a big statement. But what is it about liberation theology that we don't understand that seems to be the root within this president's brain?
Well, first of all, you need to understand where this whole concept of liberation theology came from. Liberation theology was started back in the 1950s, and it was started down in Central and South America area when they were some leftists down there were trying to overthrow the Brits. It's a humanistic doctrine, and the purpose of it is to reinterpret scriptures so that it has a humanistic element, so that you take the God aspect out of it and focus on the humanistic aspects of it, and its emphasis is on wealth redistribution. So when you talk about liberation theology, that's what you're talking about, replacing God with man for the purpose of wealth redistribution.
All right.
So what you have now is you've got people in America who are saying, let's have the rich pay their fair share, but they're not talking about the rich paying their fair share. What they're talking about is enabling people who will not participate in the concept that America was founded on. They're saying, let's reward these people for not participating in the concepts that made America great.
All right. Hence the administration today.
Exactly. And that's why you have so many laws and regulations and things being passed that reward people for not working, for people who are having children out of wedlock. And they say, well, a woman can have 10 or 12 kids and no husband. And whose responsibility is that? Well, they say it's society's responsibility to take care of the mother and all those children. And then when the mother's children have babies of their own, then they say, well, it's society's responsibility to take care of them as well.
All right. So President Obama became the perfect candidate then to frog leap liberation theology or liberalism, because any criticism against the policy could be turned to racism while the policy was advanced.
Exactly. And especially since today, Perry, one of the things you have to realize is I have, in my book, I talk about something called virtual racism. And the reason I use the term virtual racism is because today, anybody born after 1960 or 1970 has no idea what bona fide legal segregation, racism is. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever seen a colored water fountain?
I was very young when that was happening.
Have you? All right. So tell me, have you lately seen a colored water fountain?
No.
Have you seen a colored restroom?
No.
Have you seen a colored entrance to any place?
No.
Have you seen a colored phone book?
No.
So the concept of racism that I grew up with, which was covered every aspect of my life, is totally foreign and alien to anybody who was born after the 1965 Voting Rights Act, the 1964 Civil Rights Act, because it doesn't exist in America anymore. So what people do is they take virtual racism, and anytime somebody looks at you crooked or they don't like what you said, and if you're white and they're black or you're Hispanic or blah, 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 then they throw this concept, well, you're a racist out here. And since Americans are overwhelmingly not racist, they have a tendency to back off. They say, well, maybe it's not as bad as all that, so let's let them have that. And that is the part of the problem we have in America today. If Americans were even 1/10 as racist as some of these people allege, then we would see some real problems existing in our society today.
Well, because the media has kept this alive and has created a perceived racism in this country, it really opened the door for the Islamic faith to come in and hide behind racism while it propagates its nonsense.
Exactly. And that's why I say the most uninformed citizen, the dangerous citizen, is not armed but uninformed, because when you are not aware of the facts, then you allow fiction and fables to become reality in your life. Let me give you an example. You ever been to England?
Yes.
Okay. So if I were to set before you a dish called trifle, you would know what it was, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so people who have not been to England have no idea what trifle is. So if I set down a dish of, let's just say I set down something with bananas and Jell-O and crushed up cookies in front of them, and I said, this is an English dish called trifle. If they've never been there and they've never tasted, they've never experienced it, then when they say, oh, I like trifle. Well, that's not trifle at all. But when you don't know what the facts are, then you can be easily led down the primrose path.
Wow. This is fascinating. Before I run out of time, one more question, or actually two more questions. Do you think we'll ever get to an honest dialogue about race in this country?
Well, you know, look here, a recent poll that was conducted by the Opinion Research Corporation says that a majority of Americans, 60% of whites and 84% of blacks, believe that racism today ranks somewhere between, quote, somewhat serious and very serious. But when asked if they themselves were racist, guess what? Only 13% of whites and 12% of blacks considered themselves racially biased.
Wow.
So you see, racism really is today's modern racism is an invention of the secular media, which is, in my opinion, is out to continue to drive this wedge between the peoples in this country. You know, you remember one of the things they said about America, of many nations or many peoples, one?
Mm-hmm.
The reason people come to America, Perry, is because America is like no other country on the face of the earth. There is no other country, bar none, like the United States of America. And the purpose that I wrote Black Yellowdogs was to encourage people to vote principle, not party. And I know we're running out of time, but I got to tell you, the education system has failed to teach our students what a revolutionary concept America truly is. It is truly unique, and here's why. Because it's founded on Judeo-Christian principles, which says human sovereignty, based on man's being made in the image and likeness of God, is required because we are responsible and bear the consequences or the benefits of our decisions.
1 minute. You think the church is going to wake up and take possession of the land again?
Well, if it doesn't, it shall be trodden underfoot, just as we've seen it happen in the Middle East. If you don't wake up here, we'll allow the seculars and the Muslims and other people to come in, and the next thing you know, it'll be illegal to worship God. Oh, it's already illegal to worship God publicly, isn't it?
Oh, Ben, you're an inspiration. Black Yellowdogs, the most dangerous citizen is not armed but uninformed. Ben Kinchlow, get a copy of it. Check it out with WND Books or WorldNet Daily. There's a picture of it.
BenKinchlow.com?
Yep. And at the bookstores. Hey, thanks, my friend. Keep up the good work, and look forward to talking to you again real soon. I love your spirit.
You too, Perry. Keep it up. Thanks for having me, brother.
All right, God bless. All right, Ben Kinchlow with us today, and fascinating book. Again, check it out at worldnetdaily.com, the book's there, WND.com. And then, of course, you may want to look at it at Amazon or online at Amazon or at Barnes & Noble, places like that, and also at Evangel in the mall or Christian Discount Books over in Jacksonville. I think you'll find it to be fascinating. Ben has done his homework here. He's done a fabulous job of doing this. And believe me, as being a black conservative himself, who literally converted from liberalism to conservatism and then became a minister, he knows what this fight is all about and what the battle is all about. So you may want to check it out. Black Yellowdogs by Ben Kinchlow. All right, we'll see you next time on Focus Today.